In today's video, we will explore and evaluate Alan Wake 2, the horror game developed by Remedy Entertainment. Alan Wake 2, the striking new narrative-driven horror game from Remedy Entertainment, understands this fear so many writers and other creative people face well, and uses it as the seed of frightful inspiration for its surreal horror odyssey. Alan Wake 2, the striking new narrative-driven horror game from Remedy Entertainment, understands this fear so many writers and other creative people face well, and uses it as the seed of frightful inspiration for its surreal horror odyssey. The first Alan Wake, released in 2010 for the Xbox 360, starred the titular character gradually being drawn into a dark mystery in the Twin Peaks-esque town of Bright Falls, complete with a diner, a lamp, rather than log, lady, and a world-weary sheriff. After losing his wife to a dark presence, Alan fought to bring her back, sacrificing himself to the dark presence in the dark place. It's very dark. Alan discovered he could turn his fiction into reality through writing in the dark place. The dark presence wanted to use his talents and creativity to make the world in its image. Or something. It was always a bit unclear. Canonically, Alan has been stuck in the dark place since 2010. The game picks up 13 years after writer Alan Wake's disappearance at the end of the first game, following both his continuing attempts to escape the mysterious dark place. Alan Wake may second be about creative doubt and struggle, but the game itself oozes confidence, a rare trait in modern big-budget games. 2010's Alan Wake ended with a cliffhanger that saw its novelist protagonist become trapped in dark place, and fans have been eagerly awaiting a full-fledged continuation of his story ever since. To avoid any prolonged wait, we will start right away. Like other survival horror, this is a game where two or more enemies create a challenge. You do have access to grenade-type weapons, but they are rare and often best saved for the most difficult boss fights. The story of Alan Wake 2 revolves around two characters, Saga Anderson and Alan Wake. Saga Anderson, a talented FBI agent, is dispatched to investigate a series of ritualistic murders taking place in Bright Falls, fighting cultists and other possessed entities. Using only a few weapons with little ammo, Saga must use her flashlight to burn away a kind of dark shield around enemies. Alan, meanwhile, is living in a nightmare version of New York City. Filled with shadowy aspects of people whispering his name, Alan must use his writing powers to rewrite the world to escape. The shadow aspects are not all dangerous, but you can only tell which ones will hurt after observing them for a while. This creates a constantly tense scenario because you never know which, if any, will attack. Alan keeps his flashlight trained, while the shadows whisper his name alongside weird incantations about dreams and darkness, reminiscent of the infected floating office workers in Remedy's previous title, Control, which is set in the same universe. In Alan's nightmare New York City, he can rewrite entire scenes to change a plot in the scene he's presented. He does this from his mind's writer's room. It's an enjoyable mechanic since it plays into Alan's abilities but also lets you, as a player, shape the world by mixing and matching plots and scenes. New information, resources, and paths are revealed. Saga, meanwhile, has a mind place she can enter at any time, complete with a red thread murder board and coffee machine. Here, she can keep track of suspects, evidence, and so on. Saga's ability is to sense the truth behind people's words, giving her psychic insight. Saga makes deductions from evidence she discovers, driving the plot forward. It's a pity that there's little player involvement in her deductions, but it does streamline the process. Like Control and Quantum Break, Alan Wake 2 mixes live-action cutscenes with gameplay. But the graphics are so astounding, it will take a moment to distinguish between the two. Lighting, design, and art are so impeccably put together with the confidence of a team that knows exactly the world they want to create, the story they want to tell, and the feelings they want to evoke. Alan's New York is covered in stunning graffiti, litter, broken lights, neon signs, a sickening testament to capitalistic vanity and deterioration, mirroring Alan's own wasted years as a hotshot writer. Saga's small-town America has shaking woods, monstrous trees, and creaking cabins, wrapped in a sound direction that in itself would terrify me, with sudden jump scares that quickly fill your entire screen. But every chapter is unique, and every set piece requires new consideration. There is no way to feel grounded such that you can predict where Remedy will take you or what it will expect out of you. There's a confidence here, in theme and story, in weirdness, that demonstrates a studio at the top of its game. So rarely do we see such freedom in a studio to carve out its identity in its titles, with such high production values and skill. But every chapter is unique, and every set piece requires new consideration. There is no way to feel grounded such that you can predict where Remedy will take you or what it will expect out of you. There's a confidence here, in theme and story, in weirdness, that demonstrates a studio at the top of its game. So rarely do we see such freedom in a studio to carve out its identity in its titles, with such high production values and skill. Ultimately, it doesn't matter how much autobiography went into the story of Alan Wake or its sequel. What matters is that this game has the freedom to be unabashedly itself, that it can feature a 15-minute, live-action art house film at one point, a film created just for the game, and that nobody at Remedy or anywhere else said let's cut that to save money or let's make this story more conventional and easy to understand. Or, if they did, they were overruled, leaving Alan Wake 2 free to fascinate and puzzle us with its many narrative layers and details that offer no easy explanations. It's thrilling, in a time when games generally play it safe and offer up stories designed to satisfy in traditional ways, to encounter one so fully committed to its own vision. What keeps it all on the right side of fun rather than pretentious is how willing Remedy is to punctuate its big ideas with a laugh. Alan Wake 2 is frightening and in its serious moments atmospheric and dramatic, but it's also the funniest game I've played this year. It's brilliantly good at finding the humor both in over-the-top absurdity, such as a musical sequence that has to be seen to be believed, and in the quiet and very personal oddities of a small-town community. At its best, it weaves horror and comedy directly together. I did not expect one of the game's most fascinating and disturbing little mysteries to kick off with a local radio host announcing his show's beef jerky sponsorship. Flavors include hickory smoked, teriyaki, and hickory smoked teriyaki. It's hugely enhanced as well by the many creative techniques the game uses to tell its story. Far from just sitting you down and making you watch cutscenes, it's constantly experimenting with new ways to draw you in. Brilliantly odd live-action sequences are interspersed throughout, often elegantly incorporated into in-engine sequences. Saga's detective work involves creating your own investigation corkboards, pinning story elements and clues you discover into connected webs of fact and speculation that help you join the dots between seemingly disparate events. Radio excerpts, public access TV commercials, photographs, original songs, pages of Alan's manuscript and more add color and detail. At one point you can even settle down in a haunted cinema and watch a full horror short film and finish. You're simply barraged with cool stuff to watch, listen to, and interact with, all of it part of one big, weird tapestry. Even the ability to switch between the two characters becomes a major part of how you experience the story. At first I dismissed this option as a gimmick, but the further you get into each character's journey, the more you find fascinating connections between them that make the mechanic's purpose more clear. The game's favorite bits of symbolism, loops, doppelgangers, darkness and light, are ever present in both, but as you find more specific parallels you experience your own personal order of reveals and twists. It certainly doesn't hurt that all of this is presented with such visual craft and flair. Its use of light and shadow isn't quite as striking as the first game's was back in 2010, but it's a proper 2023 technical powerhouse. The fantastically detailed graphics are impressive throughout, particularly the animation of the characters, whose appearances are so realistic, and their movements and facial expressions so believable, that the game is able to blend in-engine interactions with live-action sequences near seamlessly. The recommended specs are definitely intimidating as a result, however, it ran perfectly smoothly on my relatively beefy PC, RTX 3080, Ryzen 9 5900X, 32GB RAM, but only with a mix of medium and high graphics settings, with ray tracing turned off and AI upscaling helping out on the resolution side. I do have to wonder how many players actually exist who'll have the hardware to experience these visuals at their very best. Past the visual spectacle of it all, it's not always easy to hold on to the thread of what's actually happening in Alan Wake 2 and where the story is going. Inevitably a tale told half in a reality being twisted into fiction, and half in a psychological nightmare realm, doesn't quite follow your typical A to B to C plot structure, and the way it draws on elements of not just the first game and its spin-off, but also Control, Max Payne, and even to a small degree Quantum Break, will make it hard for anyone not au fait with Remedy's back catalog to keep up. A lot of the time you're better off going with the flow than too deeply trying to dissect the literal order of events, though there's certainly plenty to pick apart and to look for in a second playthrough. It works as much as a roller coaster ride of imagination as it does a horror thriller. That feels like a symptom of a Remedy that's more confident and more independent than ever, and that's something that colors the entire experience of Alan Wake 2. This is a studio with a truly unique perspective, indulging in all of its wildest ideas and grandest ambitions, and though you couldn't call it focused or restrained, it's a glorious sprawl of surreal horror to explore. It's rare that a game of this scope is allowed to be so completely itself, and the result is an experience that will stay with you long after you've seen every terrifying encounter, cheesy manuscript page, and quirky local TV commercial it has to offer.